As our ancestors developed more sophisticated ways to comfort their sleeping bodies, they were simultaneously developing incredibly complex ways to understand their sleeping minds. In the ancient world, from the fertile banks of the Nile to the plains of Mesopotamia, the night was never merely an absence of day. It was not a void, a simple period of unconsciousness and biological repair. The night was a place. It was another dimension, a different state of being, as real and as significant as the waking world. And the bridge to this other dimension, the vehicle for this nightly journey, was the dream. For these early civilizations, sleep was a sacred act, and dreams were the divine language of the cosmos. Let us travel back to the world of the ancient Egyptians. Their entire civilization was built upon a profound and intricate relationship with the afterlife. Their waking lives were, in many ways, a grand and elaborate preparation for the journey they would take after death. It is no surprise, then, that they saw the nightly act of sleep as a dress rehearsal for this ultimate journey. They saw sleep as a temporary death, a state in which the Ba, a part of the soul they depicted as a human-headed bird, would leave the physical body to travel freely in the spirit world. Every morning, the return of the Ba to the body was a form of rebirth, a reaffirmation of life. This belief imbued the simple act of waking up with a sense of sacred gratitude and relief. Because the soul was believed to be traveling in the realm of the gods and the dead, the dreams it experienced were not considered to be random firings of a resting brain. They were direct, unmediated experiences. A dream was not a symbol of a thing, it was the thing itself. If you dreamt of a deceased relative, it was not your memory of them, it was a genuine visit from their spirit. If you dreamt of walking through the fields of the underworld, your soul was truly there. This made dreams incredibly powerful and deeply significant. They were a direct line of communication to the divine, a source of prophecy, wisdom, and crucial warnings. The interpretation of these divine messages became a highly specialized and respected art form. The Egyptians compiled what could be described as the world's first dream dictionaries. Papyri, such as the famous Papyrus Chester Beatty III, contain long lists of dreams and their prescribed interpretations. These were not vague psychological interpretations, they were direct, formulaic translations. For example, the papyrus states, "If a man sees himself in a dream looking out of a window, it is good. It means the hearing of his cry. Conversely, if a man sees himself in a dream with his bed on fire, it is bad. It means his wife will be driven out." These interpretations were often based on puns and wordplay in the ancient Egyptian language, a divine code that only the learned could decipher. Temples were built that were dedicated to the art of dreaming. The most famous of these were the sanatoria, or sleep temples, dedicated to gods like Imhotep, the deified physician, and Serapis in the later Greco-Roman period. A person suffering from a physical ailment or a spiritual crisis would make a pilgrimage to one of these temples. They would undergo purification rituals, make offerings to the god, and then sleep within a special sacred chamber of the temple. The dream they had that night was believed to be a direct message from the god, often providing a diagnosis or prescribing a cure.
The temple priests would then help the pilgrim to interpret the dream and guide their treatment. This practice, known as dream incubation, shows just how deeply sleep and dreams were integrated into their medical and spiritual practices. It was a healthcare system based on the belief that the sleeping mind had access to a divine wisdom that the waking mind did not. Now, let us move eastward to the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the land of Mesopotamia. Here, in the civilizations of Sumer, Akkad, and Babylon, we find a similar reverence for the power of dreams. The Sumerians believed that the soul of a sleeper would travel and meet with the spirits of the dead who would impart wisdom. One of the oldest surviving works of literature in the world, the Epic of Gilgamesh, is filled with powerful prophetic dreams. The hero Gilgamesh has dreams that foretell the arrival of his companion Enkidu, and later dreams that prophesy Enkidu's death. These dreams are not trivial, they are major plot points, driving the hero's actions and shaping his destiny. The Babylonians, like the Egyptians, practiced dream incubation and compiled extensive dream interpretation manuals. One of the most famous is the Ikur Ipush, a vast library of omens that included a significant section on dreams. Their system was incredibly detailed, believing that every single element of a dream was a significant symbol. Where you were, what you were eating, who you were talking to, even the direction you were facing, all of it was part of a complex divine code. They also believed that the timing of a dream mattered. A dream that occurred in the first watch of the night was considered less reliable than one that occurred just before dawn, as the soul was thought to have traveled further and be closer to the realm of the gods at that time. The role of the dream interpreter, the Baru, was a highly respected profession, often in direct service to the king. The king's dreams were considered matters of state security. A king's nightmare could be interpreted as a bad omen for an upcoming battle, or a sign of divine displeasure that could lead to famine or plague. A positive dream, on the other hand, could be the green light for a major military campaign or the construction of a new temple. The fate of the entire empire could rest on the interpretation of a single royal dream. In both of these foundational civilizations, we see a world in which the night was not a time of inactivity, but a time of profound activity on a spiritual plane. Sleep was a journey, and the dream was the travelogue. This belief had a powerful psychological effect. It meant that life did not stop when you closed your eyes. Your existence continued in another, equally important realm. It gave people a sense of connection to something much larger than their daily waking lives, to their ancestors, to their gods, to the very fabric of the cosmos. It meant that solutions to intractable problems, cures for baffling illnesses, and guidance for momentous decisions were not to be found by thinking harder, but by surrendering to the wisdom of the sacred night. This deep, instinctive reverence for the sleeping mind is something we have largely lost in our modern, rational world, and in losing it, we may have lost access to a unique form of wisdom that our ancestors knew to be one of the most powerful forces in their lives.
We now let the great river civilizations of the ancient world fade into the mists of time. We journey forward, across centuries, across continents, to the world of medieval and early modern Europe. This is a world of feudal lords and peasant farmers,
of stone castles and thatched roof huts, a world lit only by the sun, the moon, and the humble flame of a candle or a hearth fire. And in this world, for a period spanning well over 1,000 years, the vast majority of people experienced the night in a way that is almost completely alien to us. It was a night that was neatly and universally divided into two distinct parts. They did not have one single consolidated block of sleep. They had two. This was the world of biphasic sleep. The term biphasic simply means in two phases, but this clinical term fails to capture the richness of a lived experience that was so commonplace, so deeply ingrained in the fabric of society, that it was rarely ever commented upon. It was simply the way the night worked. Just as we assume the sun will rise in the morning, our ancestors assumed that the night would contain not one, but two separate sleeps, punctuated by a quiet, mysterious period of wakefulness in between. Historians, poring over countless historical documents, from personal diaries and letters to medical texts and legal depositions, have uncovered a mountain of evidence that reveals this forgotten rhythm of the night. This pattern was not confined to a single country or a single social class. It was a universal phenomenon across pre-industrial Europe. A French peasant farmer, an English aristocrat, an Italian merchant, a German monk, all of them, for centuries, would have structured their night around these two sleeps. They had names for them. In English, they were simply the first sleep and the second sleep. In Latin, the language of the educated, they were primus somnus and secundus somnus. In French, premier sommeil. The very existence of this common everyday vocabulary across different languages and cultures shows us how deeply embedded this practice was. So, what did this rhythm look like? The day, for most people, was dictated by the sun. Life was physically demanding, and when the sun went down, darkness fell like a thick, heavy blanket. There was little to do. Artificial lighting was expensive and dangerous. A single tallow candle, smelly and smoky, was a luxury for a poor family. So they would go to bed early by our standards, perhaps not long after dusk, around 8 or 9 p.m. They would fall into their first sleep, a deep and profound slumber that would last for several hours, typically until around midnight or 1 a.m. And then something remarkable would happen. They would wake up. Naturally, effortlessly. This was not the panicked, anxiety-ridden awakening of a modern insomniac. It was not seen as a disorder or a problem. On the contrary, it was a normal, expected, and often welcomed part of the night. This period of quiet, peaceful wakefulness, which historians call the watch or the waking period, would last for 1, 2, or even 3 hours. It was a distinct and recognized interval in the nightly schedule. And once this period of wakefulness was complete, they would feel a natural drowsiness return, and they would go back to bed for their second sleep, which would last until the first light of dawn. The evidence for this is overwhelming and fascinating. In the Canterbury Tales, written in the late 14th century, Geoffrey Chaucer has a character decide to go back to bed after her first sleep is over. In a French physician's guide from the 16th century, doctors advised their patients that the best time for conception was not at the end of a long, tiring day, but after the first sleep, when the couple would have more energy and less fatigue. This period of waking was seen as a time of heightened tranquility and clarity. Even legal documents reflect this reality. A court deposition from 1555 in England describes a woman named Jane Hales, who was a witness to a nighttime event. She testified that the event occurred after she had had her first sleep and before she had returned to her second. Her testimony was accepted without question. The court and everyone present understood this framing of the night perfectly. It was as normal as saying something happened before lunch. One of the most powerful pieces of evidence comes from the Christian Church. For centuries, prayers were structured around this nightly rhythm. The nocturnal prayer services, or matins, in monasteries were often scheduled to take place after the monk's first sleep, during that natural period of quiet wakefulness around midnight. It was considered a holy and spiritually potent time, when the world was quiet and the mind was clear, free from the distractions of the day. This period was seen as a gift, a sacred interval for contemplation and communion with God. Why did they sleep this way? The most likely answer is that it is the most natural way for humans to sleep when they are not influenced by artificial light. In laboratory experiments, where subjects have been deprived of all artificial light for several weeks, their sleep patterns invariably and naturally drift into this same biphasic model. They sleep for a block of about 4 hours, wake for a few hours, and then sleep for another block of 4 hours. It seems that the modern, consolidated 8-hour sleep is a biological anomaly, an artifact of our artificially lit world. Our pre-industrial ancestors were not doing something strange. They were simply sleeping in the way our bodies were always designed to sleep when governed by the natural cycles of light and dark. Understanding this is the key that unlocks the rest of our story. It allows us to see our ancestors' nights not as a long, empty void, but as a rich and varied landscape. The night had a structure, a geography. It had its deep valleys of slumber and its quiet moonlit plateaus of wakefulness. To them, the night was not a single monolithic block of time to be conquered or endured. It was a journey with distinct stages, each with its own purpose, its own feeling, and its own unique opportunities for work, for thought, and for connection. This was the lost world of the divided night.
To truly comprehend the world of biphasic sleep, we must do more than just understand its schedule. We must try to inhabit it. We must use our imagination to step into the worn leather shoes of a person for whom this rhythm was as natural as breathing. Let us imagine a man, a peasant farmer in 14th century France, whom we will call Jean. His life is one of relentless physical toil, a life governed not by the ticking of a clock, but by the great slow turning of the sun and the seasons.
And for Jean, the first sleep is not a choice or a luxury. It is a profound and desperate necessity. It is a plunge into oblivion, a temporary death that makes the next day's life possible. Jean's day begins before the first hint of dawn, with the crowing of the rooster. He works from the moment the sun is high enough to cast a shadow until it disappears below the horizon, leaving the fields in a deep purple twilight. His work is a full-body experience. It is the strain of his back as he guides a heavy wooden plow through the rocky soil. It is the ache in his shoulders from swinging a scythe for hours on end during the harvest. It is the burn in his thighs as he walks miles to and from the village market. His hands are a landscape of his labor, calloused and cracked, his fingernails permanently edged with the dirt of the earth he cultivates. By the time the day ends, he is not merely tired. He is consumed by a fatigue so deep it feels as if it has settled into his very bones. He returns to his small, one-room hut, a simple structure of wattle and daub with a thatched roof. The inside is dark and smoky. The only light comes from the low, glowing embers of the central hearth fire which his wife Isabel has been carefully tending. The air is thick with the smells of his life, the sharp, earthy scent of the damp floor, the lingering aroma of the simple pottage they ate for their evening meal, the smell of wood smoke that clings to every surface, and the close animal smell of the family's goat which might be sleeping in a corner for warmth and safety. There is no privacy here. This single room is a kitchen, a living room, and a bedroom for Jean, Isabel, their 3 small children, and perhaps Jean's aging father. As the last light drains from the sky, the world outside becomes a place of profound darkness and folklore. It is a world populated by mischievous sprites, wandering spirits, and things best left undisturbed. The safety of the family lies within the 4 walls of their hut, with the wooden door barred shut. The transition to sleep is swift. There are no books to read, no screens to watch. The fire provides the only light, and to burn precious candles merely for illumination would be an unthinkable waste. Their world has shrunk to the small, warm circle of the hearth. The family bed is not a private, personal space. It is the heart of the home's nocturnal life. It is a large wooden frame, or perhaps just a designated corner on the floor, filled with a deep sack of ticking, a coarse, durable cloth, stuffed with whatever was available. For a family like Jean's, it is most likely straw. The straw is lumpy and rustles with every movement. It needs to be fluffed and turned regularly to prevent it from becoming a flattened, uncomfortable mat. Over the years, it breaks down into a fine, dusty chaff that subtly scents the air. In the cold of winter, the entire family would climb into this single bed, a tangle of bodies seeking collective warmth. The children would be nestled in the middle, protected from the cold draughts that snaked through the poorly sealed walls. They would sleep under a rough, heavy blanket of spun wool, or perhaps even the hide of a cow. For Jean, lying down is an act of surrender. The moment his body touches the rustling straw, the sheer weight of his exhaustion pulls him down. His mind, occupied all day with the practical, immediate concerns of sun, soil, and rain,
does not race with the abstract anxieties that plague the modern sleeper. His worries are tangible. Will the harvest be good? Will the Lord raise the taxes? But his body's need for rest is more powerful than any thought. The sounds around him are the lullaby of his life, the soft rhythmic breathing of his children, the occasional sleepy murmur from Isabel, the low crackle and pop of the dying fire, the sound of the wind whistling around the eaves of the hut. He falls into his first sleep. This is not a gentle drifting off. It is a rapid, heavy descent into a deep, dreamless state. It is a plunge into oblivion, a temporary death that makes the next day's life possible. Jean's body begins the crucial work of repair. His muscles, strained and torn by the day's labor, begin to mend. Growth hormone is released, healing tissues. His brain consolidates the practical, procedural memories of the day, the feel of the plow, the rhythm of the scythe. There is little to no dream activity during this phase. It is a state of near total oblivion, a temporary erasure of the self. To the modern mind, obsessed with light, dream-filled REM sleep, this phase might seem unproductive. But for Jean, it is everything. It is the alchemy that turns the day's crushing fatigue into the strength he will need to face the dawn. It is the silent, unseen miracle that allows his harsh and unforgiving life to continue. The first sleep is not a gentle rest. It is a vital, primal act of recovery, a deep and necessary plunge into the silent, healing darkness.
Deep in the belly of the night, after several hours submerged in the heavy, dreamless ocean of the first sleep, a gentle tide begins to turn. For our farmer, Jean, and for the millions like him across the pre-industrial world, consciousness returns. But it does not return with a jolt, not with the panicked start of a modern person waking to a glowing alarm clock, their heart already racing with the anxieties of the coming day. No, this is a different kind of awakening. It is a slow, soft, and entirely natural emergence, like a diver gradually ascending from the deep. He floats up from the depths of oblivion and breaks the surface into a world of profound quiet and stillness. This is the beginning of the watch. Jean opens his eyes. The small hut is almost completely dark, but not entirely. The hearth fire, which was a bed of glowing embers when he fell asleep, is now little more than a faint, pulsing red heart in the center of the room. It casts just enough dim crimson light to trace the familiar outlines of his world, the curve of a clay pot, the dark shape of the sleeping goat in the corner, the soft mounds of his children huddled together under the heavy blanket. The air is cool and still. The only sound is the gentle, rhythmic breathing of his family, and the low, mournful sigh of the wind as it circles the hut. His first feeling is not anxiety. It is not frustration. It is a sense of deep, abiding peace. His body, having passed through the crucible of the first sleep, is no longer aching with the profound fatigue of the day. The sharp edges of exhaustion have been smoothed away.
His mind, too, feels different. It is clear, calm, and entirely uncluttered. The immediate, pressing concerns of his waking life, the state of the crops, the repair of a tool, the weather, seem distant, held at bay by the thick, quiet buffer of the night. He is awake, but he is in a state of consciousness that is unique to this specific time. It is a liminal state, a space between the deep unconsciousness of sleep and the full, bustling awareness of the day. What does he do in this hour or two of quiet wakefulness? This is the question that most fascinates the modern mind, so accustomed to viewing any waking moment in the night as a failure. For Jean and his contemporaries, this was not wasted time. It was valuable, productive, and deeply personal time. It was a gift from the night. First, there are practical, gentle chores. Jean might quietly slip out of the shared bed. The straw rustles softly, but no one else stirs. He moves with a slow, practiced grace in the near darkness, his body knowing the layout of this small room better than his eyes ever could. He goes to the hearth. Crouching down, he gently blows on the last few stubborn embers. A tiny spark grows brighter, then another. He adds a few small dry twigs, which catch with a soft crackle. Then he carefully places a larger, seasoned log on top. He does not want a blazing fire, just a steady, slow burn that will last until the morning. He is tending the heart of his home, ensuring its survival through the cold hours. He might then go to the door, lift the heavy wooden bar, and step outside for a moment. The cold night air is a shock, clean and sharp in his lungs. He looks up at the sky. The moon, perhaps, is a silver crescent, casting a pale, ghostly light over the silent fields. The stars are a brilliant, silent explosion of light. He can feel the immense scale of the world, the profound silence of the sleeping land. He might check on his small livestock, the goat, a few chickens in their coop, ensuring they are safe. This brief connection with the nocturnal world is grounding, a reminder of his place in the great silent turning of the cosmos. Isabel, his wife, might also stir. Perhaps she stays in the warmth of the bed, or perhaps she joins him by the newly revived fire. This is their time. During the day, they are partners in labor, their interactions dictated by the endless list of tasks. But here, in the quiet heart of the night, there is space for something else. They might speak in low, hushed tones, their voices soft so as not to wake the children. They might talk of things they don't have time for during the day. A quiet worry about a child's cough, a shared memory, a hope for the coming season. It is a time of deep, uncomplicated intimacy, a connection forged in the shared vulnerability of the deep night. Historical texts from the period even suggest that this was considered the ideal time for marital relations, after the first sleep had washed away the day's exhaustion, and before the second sleep brought dreams. This was also a time for the life of the mind and spirit. For the vast majority of people like Jean who were illiterate, this was a time for prayer and contemplation. In the silence, with the distractions of the world asleep,
it was easier to feel a connection to the divine. He might recite the few simple prayers he knew, his mind turning to the Virgin Mary or the local patron saint, his mind focused and clear. This was a folk spirituality, deep and personal, woven into the fabric of the night. For the literate minority, a monk in his cell, a nobleman in his castle, a scholar in his study, this period was a golden opportunity. The mind, rested and refreshed, was believed to be at its sharpest. With the house quiet, they could read by the light of a precious candle, the flame barely flickering in the still air. They could write letters, compose poetry, or study complex theological texts. The thoughts that came during this period were considered to be of a higher quality, more profound and insightful than those wrestled from a tired mind at the end of a long day. It was a time of peak creativity and intellectual clarity. Even social life could extend into this nocturnal interval. While it was not common for a peasant like Jean, in more tightly knit villages or in the bustling, crowded cities of the early modern period, it was not unheard of for people to visit their neighbors during the watch. A quiet knock on the door, a shared cup of ale by the fire, a hushed conversation about village affairs. The night had its own quieter, more intimate social rhythm. And so this waking period was not an empty void of tossing and turning. It was a rich and textured part of life. It was a time for chores, for intimacy, for prayer, for study, for creativity. It was a secret world, hidden in the middle of the night, a personal and peaceful sanctuary between two great continents of sleep. After an hour or two of this quiet activity, a natural, gentle wave of drowsiness would begin to wash over Jean once more. His mind would feel satisfied, his spirit calm. He would return to the shared bed, pull the heavy blanket over him, and feel his consciousness begin to soften at the edges. He was not returning to sleep out of a sense of failure for having woken up. He was simply moving on to the next expected stage of the night's journey. He was ready for the second sleep.